Animation. It's been around for more than a century, and with the help of technology, it has changed in numerous and incredible ways. From simple black and white frame by frame to amazing CGI that we see today. The production of animation has brought entertainment, joy, and the expression of imagination beyond our wildest dreams for society. But how exactly did animation get started, and why is this so commonly used? Was it a certain film, an invention, or an idea? Well, we're about to let you know. This is the history of animation. As we all know, everything that's come into place has to have been started with an idea. So what was the idea or the ideas that sparked the evolution of animation? And when did animation really get started? We asked common people of what they might have thought.
No, I do not, but I do know that television has overrun it from movie scenes or other shows like cartoons.
Oh. I don't know, maybe Hammurabi put up his laws like through drawings on stone walls.
Mr. Kale was actually the closest on being correct. Egyptians would draw hieroglyphics on the wall, showing a sequence of motion, showing movement, an idea that drawings can be brought to life. It appears that hieroglyphics aren't the only form of ancient motion drawings.
5,200 years ago in Iran, they found an earthen pot with 5 pictures on it in sequence of action.
But it wasn't until June 19th, 1878 that a specific item led to the development of motion pictures.
A gentleman had a bet that a horse's feet went off the ground when running, and so photographers set up cameras at different points and took consecutive photos of the horse running to prove that the horse's feet were all off the ground at one time. They put it together to realize that they could do film, which now they shoot at 24 frames per second.
But what exactly was the very first tool of animation?
After people started getting into flip books, in 1832, Joseph Plato had created the phenakistoscope. The phenakistoscope consisted of 2 discs mounted on the same axis. The first disc had slots around the edge, and the second contained drawing of successive action. When viewed in the mirror, it would give the appearance of movement. This is the waltzing couple in 1893. Then, in 1877, Charles Renard created the praxinoscope.
The praxinoscope acts as a much clearer version of the phanettoscope because it has mirrors on the inside of it. These mirrors, once spun around, copy the images that are on the outside of the praxinoscope to create a looping animation.
In 1999, Disney's movie Tarzan shows a praxinoscope being used by Professor Porter to show Tarzan modern-day animation in the late 1880s.
After the praxinoscope was invented, something came out that would lead to movies that were animations, the praxinoscope theater. Released at the end of the 1880s, the praxinoscope theater was a combined version of the praxinoscope and the recent projector technologies. What it would basically do is project a hologram that would come out into the theater, creating the first example of animation in movies. The zoetrope was also released during the praxinoscope and phanettoscope age.
It is a cylinder that has pictures painted around it, and it spins, and you squat down and look within a slit, and it appears that whatever in there is moving, like birds flying as it's spinning.
You see, outside it wouldn't look like much, but once you looked inside the little holes, you could see an animation. Some zoetropes are still kept today. One of the most famous of these zoetropes is the Disney Pixar's Toy Story zoetrope. Once going fast enough, a flash will emit, and then the zoetrope will have an animation that
Now, everything begins with ideas and inventions, but what was the true spark of it all? The one film that truly started the evolution of animation was the first truly animated movie called The Humorous Phases of Funny Faces. Created by James Blackton in 1906, this cartoon uses stop motion to create movement. This movie consists of Blackton drawing faces, people, dogs, and items on a blackboard and using frame-by-frame technique to make it appear that people on the blackboard are moving. After this, others really started getting into animation and wanting to create their own, but instead on paper making cartoons. Thus, the animation industry was born.
Now I already know what you're thinking. What about all of our favorite cartoon characters and all of our memorable cartoons? When do they start to come in? Well, they start right about now with Gertie the Dinosaur. The first ever animation that was a huge hit was Gertie the Dinosaur. Gertie the Dinosaur was a series of cartoons, not just one, which made it really unique. It would be played with live action and cartoons. Gertie the Dinosaur would feature sound, however there would be no audio, because it was back before audio could really make it onto the animation films. Gertie was the very first of our cartoon characters, and she really sprung on all of the cartoon characters. There was a major problem though. An animation like this would take months or even a year to make. That was until John Bray came along and he found clear cells. John Bray created clear cells in 1915. He used these to make a still background, which would save time on animation and money. John Bray also created the rotoscope in 1917. This made for clearer animations and it looked much more realistic.
But when the 1920s rolled around, that's when all the famous cartoon characters came into play.
The very first famous animated cartoon character was Felix the Cat from the 1920s. He was made by Pat Sullivan and started the huge cartoon phase. He led to the most famous cartoon character, which is known today as Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse was released in 1928 in his very popular first debut, Steamboat Willie, by Walt Disney.
It is the first animation to successfully feature sound and is what propelled Disney to what it is today. The 1930s had brought characters such as Pluto, the national sex symbol Betty Boop, created by Max Fleischer, who debuted in the cartoon short Dirty Dishes, Donald Duck, and Bugs Bunny with the rest of the Looney Tunes. In 1937, Disney created the first sound and color animated feature film, which was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The 40s brought Woody the Woodpecker, Tom and Jerry, and Mighty Mouse. These characters were brought to compete against Mickey Mouse and Felix the Cat.
It was at this point that John Whitney had brought us into the future of animation. John Whitney had started to make the first computer animation, which was a bunch of different lights going in different directions, that he called The Matrix. This was made in 1957, and it's a clip from the actual Matrix. This was the major breakthrough into computer animation. The first person to go through computer animation was John Park. He made what was called CGI, computer-generated imagery. These faces are an example of his CGI power. With CGI, he could make animation directly from the computer, which was not available yet. Now, CGI animation was ready to make the big screen, but not a lot of people knew how to approach it. That wasn't until this company came named Magi. Magi was the first company to fully master CGI. They were using the CGI premise in a movie that was both live action and animation, Tron. However, since Tron was mostly live action, not a lot of CGI premiered, so it wasn't the first CGI movie.
In 1994, Disney's movie The Lion King is the first animated movie to have slow motion animation in it. The first full-length 3D CGI film was the Pixar and Disney movie Toy Story. In our current day, animation has been divided into three groups: animation, stop motion, and CGI. Animation has evolved in numerous ways, but what is one of the main factors that's really impacted animation to change?
I think society has, because you can see through different cartoons and animations that as society changes, so does the cartoons. They used to have war sort of cartoons, getting people to go for war using cartoons and whatnot. But nowadays it's just fun stuff that we love to watch.
Being around for so long, animation has made a huge impact on society.
It's evolved so much that it's made people become more creative.
Animation has affected society because without it you wouldn't have the cartoon lunch boxes, and you wouldn't have your childhood, because that's what you grow up on.
It's a form of entertainment where people could get messages across, and a lot of times it was used for politics, to get political messages out.
If it wasn't for cartoons, I don't know what the world would be like.